Vacation, right?
I am.
This is 4 o'clock. We get started. All right, let's go ahead and bring the meeting to order for the Parks, Recreation, and Refuse Committee meeting. All right, our first item on the agenda is the appointment of committee chair and vice chair. Roll call. Roll call. Okay, we'll do roll call. It's not on the agenda.
Directors Fardonish
Here.
and Peterson.
Here. All right, so now we go to the picking a committee chair and vice chair.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Keep it the same.
Keep it the same.
Okay, all right. So I'll be the chair and then Director Peterson will be the vice chair. All right. The second item is the review of the rate adjustments for solid waste. So I don't know who's, Jeff, are you gonna start that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me provide a little bit of background on that. So as the committee members and the board knows, there's been a number of things that we've been dealing with solid waste. Last year, you approved the SB 1383 ordinance. So now organic recycling is a requirement in Templeton, complying with SB 1383. You recently approved a purchasing policy related to SB 1383 for paper recycling, buying post-consumer recycled paper products. We've been in communication with IWMA over the past year about the impacts to IWMA services related to 1383. Additionally, and just somewhat coincidentally, we also just administratively approved a CPI rate adjustment for mid-state solid waste rates based on the 2021 cost of living adjustment, or the CPI, that takes effect April 1st. And that was previously approved by the board in a prior Prop 218 program, and is included in the original agreement as well as in the now amended agreement. You also fairly recently and importantly approved an amendment to the franchise agreement with Mid-State Solid Waste, which requires Mid-State Solid Waste to perform certain functions to comply with SB 1383. So this is what we're briefing you on here today, and we want to review with you here today, are what are those collective impacts and how do they affect the various rates. But I understand Randy's going to be able to demonstrate, because let me back up just for a second. One of the components of the rate adjustment for Mid-State relates to some new obligations they have with regard to tracking a number of things really, but specifically cans that are not collected because of contaminants and those kinds of things, and a system for keeping track of all of that, along with a reporting of those items to IWMA and to CalRecycle, and in some cases to the district directly. So I think before we dive into the rates, Randy was going to be able to show you kind of the system that they have come up with, so you can see the additional burden that Mid-State's going to be incurring when performing their normal duties. So if this is a good time, maybe now's a good time to kind of walk you through that process.
All right, so my name is Randy Mills. I'm the general manager for Mid-State Solid Waste. So recently with these the new regulations, he's right, we have to do a little more tracking and being able to account for some different things. Up until this point, generally speaking, for our stuff, we've only had one route in the system, and we know that for that route, we know we got to go out and pick up 3 cans. We didn't really have a lot of technology into it. That's all going to change because of this. We have to be able to say that what we're picking up, where it's coming from, how much we're getting, and all that stuff. That's where our mobile pack comes into play. So every one of our trucks is going to wind up with a tablet like this inside of the truck. And what you're seeing right now is the interface as it relates to a driver in that truck. So as he goes down the list here of his service stops, he's going to have to complete the stop or add a note as to something may be happening on his route. So that way we can track, maybe they didn't have their trash can out. So the driver went out that day and recycling and green waste was out, but there was no trash. So they're gonna hit, there was no trash can out. The trash driver will bypass and the other two guys will come in and do theirs. Each one of these trucks, so we've had to set up different routes for all 3 units. So as you can see, we have 761 stops. This is today's route. This is actually the route for today here in Templeton. There's 761 stops on that route. So you multiply that by 3. So each truck is gonna have to go out and pick up all of these services and collect it onto here. This is gonna be nice and handy as well for the guys to be able to, if we have new guys out on the route, they'll actually be able to take a look and see. And it pinpoints all their stops on there. It says exactly this little blue dot right here in the middle of the screen is where we are. And then as you reflect out, it kind of shows where they're at. You can get navigation turn by turn through the route. So if it's a new guy that doesn't know how the route works, he'll be able to get on there and do turn by turn navigation stuff. But this will drop them through every single one and will ensure that everybody gets done. And every stop has to be completed in some way, shape, or form. The general gist of it is pretty kind of hands-on. We are working, I have 2 trucks now that just got some new devices that were installed inside of it. We're beta testing for the residential route. The commercial route is pretty well works for this company on that. But what it is there's going to be cameras out by the arms. There's going to be cameras inside of the hopper. There's a camera out in front of the truck. And then there's also a potentiometer on the arm. So it's going to work in conjunction with the tablet, and it's going to pick up the geocodes for every stop that's on there. So the first few times that we go through there, we will have to manually do it. And every time we hit that complete stop button on this tablet, it's going to mark that geocode. And it's going to tell the computer, this is where that stop should be. So now every time we're within X, Y coordinates of that geocode and that potentiometer dumps, it's going to say, I automatically completed that stop. If you go by that geocode and that arm doesn't complete that stop, the computer's going to come up and say, hey, what happened? Why didn't I feel that arm go? Was there no trash out? No, something happened. You got to tell me what went wrong. So the guys are going to have, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve kind of getting through this. I think we will have them up in the trucks probably within the next 3 weeks or so, at least in the first 2 trucks in the next 3 weeks, getting those first 2 units up and going. And then after that, we're going to be rolling them out to each of the 7 units that we have technology for. So
Where does it show, or does it, which can you pick up? How do you know you're picking up a green, blue, black, right?
So that actually will start when, so the driver knows based on the route. So when they log in, they're going to log in. So for instance, this one here is route A3. A3, my driver knows that his A3 route is the trash route for that. If he logs into route 31, he knows that he's picking up the recycling route. So they know based upon those route numbers. So it doesn't say that on here. Each one of those drivers knows what they're assigned for that day, whether it's trash, recycling, or green waste.
It's route specific.
It's very route, yes, it's route specific.
And then I noticed one of the options was the garbage can was contaminated. So are you guys checking for that contamination right now?
Well, right now, currently, with the new regulations, the requirement is that, and the new amendment we just signed together has container contaminants. So a container contaminant in a black container would be something that should be in a blue or a green container. So technically, we've not really checked many of them except for maybe green waste and recycling, because those were, being separated and recycled. Black can was black can, and we didn't have any reason really to look at it. The new amendment basically calls for verification that there's no container contaminants in any of the 3 containers. So we're obligated to not collect something if it's got a container contaminant. So container contaminant in a black container would be a recycling item or a green waste or a food item. And then, for a blue container, it might be food items or it might be trash in it. And then a green container, of course, would be something that's not organic or green waste or food waste. We have to check each one, and technically, per the amendment, we have to identify and not service the ones that are contaminated with something that should be in a different container.
So you're not picking up the garbage then? for those customers?
Well, we have a tag process where we're gonna tag it, and it's a little process on the machine that takes a picture of it, and then we'll also say we took a tag, because our tag has to be reported to the IWMA every month on what was tagged and why was it tagged and why was it not collected.
Okay, because I don't know if, at least I haven't got a notice that,
Very
That's-
seldom, nowadays, very seldom.
yeah, that's happening, so.
But we think it's gonna be elevated because of, basically, if you have a watermelon rind in a black container, it's a contaminant. Now, can we see every component of it? If someone puts it in a bag and ties it together and, you know, we're not gonna be tearing bags apart, but
We
the
just-
amendment requires us to look at it and make sure we're not, have a blatant disregard for a container contaminant.
So you can see this before you empty it?
So, no, well, it depends.
Yeah, it depends.
So if it's overflowing, no, the reality of that question is no, we're probably not gonna see it until it's dumped in the hopper. And
So,
then once it's in the
so
hopper,
then you just tag it and say there was a contaminant in it, but you already picked it up.
Correct. Possibly, I think once we identify the folks who aren't participating at the way that 1383 is prescribed to be participated in, it'll give us a better mechanism for our understanding, but all the cameras are kind of new and the whole state's going through this, so of course, we're cutting our teeth on it, trying to get the equipment in and get the drivers comfortable with it, but it's a review of every container that may or may not have something that shouldn't be in it. So it's gonna be burdensome. It's gonna be a big task.
When will you be sending something out to your customers saying what goes in each can? I have no clue now, I mean, under the new rule.
But with the amendment, it started the day we signed it.
Right.
So we owe a communication, but the designated agency was the IWMA by Templeton. So our amendments is basically any communication has to be coordinated and approved by the Templeton Service District and the IWMA. So I think they're in the process of identifying what's the best way to get this. The good part about 1383, it was signed into law by Governor Brown in 2016, and it goes into effect this year, but it's really kind of got a learning curve for the first year and then really another year to get better reporting and better controls. And then they're gonna do away with the self-policing, and then it's gonna be more policed by Cal Recycle and have more involvement that aren't gonna involve going through waste characterizations on each load. So we may have drivers who say, yes, I'm looking at it, I got a camera and I'm noting all the things that shouldn't be in whatever container. When the loads come back, each facility, in order to be an approved facility to be able to handle that volume, that stream, has to go through waste characterizations of a load and identify contaminants within the load that may have been missed by the driver, and then give that feedback to the IWMA and to the Cal Recycle to hopefully get more education and maybe a resending of the education material back to that route and that specific customer base.
I thought you guys were gonna put stickers on the garbage can.
We are, Jeff and I just went through the stickers after our last meeting, and the IWMA's got to update the stickers. And I think Patty told us from the IWMA said they're working on it. Again, kind of baby steps here as we go through the first couple months here. But I think once we start to get it out there and the education gets approved by not only just Templeton, but also the IWMA, we can go ahead and get the communications out.
Yeah, right now, the stickers that IWMA provided are no longer compliant with SB 1383. They have instructions that are in conflict with what SB 1383 requires. So they would be misleading the customer to be installing them now.
My own edification, what goes in a blue can from now on?
So
Like everything was gonna go into the green can.
the green can really, the only thing that's really changed with 1383 is organics or food waste coming out of the black container going in the green container. So you're eating a chicken wing, throw it in the green container. If you're eating a cantaloupe, throw the rinds into the green container. Blue container really hasn't changed all that much. It's still your bottles, your containers, your plastics, your tin, your aluminum, your glass, food containers, beverage containers, wine bottles.
Just plain paper.
Paper's fine too to go in there. Actually, there's paper also being allowed into the organics. Cal Recycle in 1383 decided to call paper organics waste stream, which it is. But there also is if you're throwing out a whole box, a banker box of paper, I'd rather you see it put in the blue bin than the green bin. But technically, it allows paper to be in the green bin as well as the blue bin. We're focused more with Jeff and the IWMA saying food contaminated paper, like a pizza box or a pizza wrapper or some other kind of wrapper that might be compostable. We want that to go in the organics. We'd rather not have that in the blue container, put it in the green container. But technically, paper's covered by an organic definition and also in the blue bin.
So I wanted the committee members to see the kind of added technology that Midstate's implementing, because when we get into the rate structure that's proposed and how those costs are spread out, you'll see that there's going to be some capital costs of this equipment that is amortized in the rates, as well as some additional time for the routes utilizing the system that's included in the rate adjustment, and some administrative time for the various reporting to IWMA and Cal Recycle, and I guess to us to TCSD as well. So all of those are components of the rate adjustment. So if you don't have any more questions, if you don't have any more questions about how Midstate's going to be collecting this information, and I think it was a good point. If a driver sees something obvious before the can is picked up, it's supposed to be tagged and left there, and then the customer repackages their waste and then gets disposed of properly. But probably more often than not, the driver's not going to know that there was a contaminant until the load's already being dumped, and in that case, it's already been collected. So, but this system they've developed is going to be able to report on both scenarios, both a contaminant that entered the truck and a container that was not picked up because of contamination. And then those records are then kept and tabulated and reported on, and the customer is informed of problems, whether it was collected or it was not collected. So there's some new, some new duties that the 1383 is requiring of I guess all of us, but of Midstate specifically as they perform this service. So okay, well, why don't we look at the rate spreadsheet? This was the item that we provided to you in Excel, as well as posted online, and then hopefully you have copies there today. And it looks like Natalie's bringing it up right now. Now, hopefully you could see this reasonably. I know what's on this page, but I'm not able to actually see the. I'm not able to read the numbers. So I think we should start. So this cover form is really collecting all the information after the subcomponents are built in. So Natalie, can you go to the second tab over? Let's make sure. I just want to cover all of these various items. So these are all subcomponents, and yeah, I'm not able to read any of this.
You want me to cover it?
Well, yeah. Well, I just want to make sure we're covering the tabs that are essential, that are important. So
Sure.
What is this?
So there's a couple things that are impacting us. Column F is basically processing. So we're not quite sure how that's going to impact the compost facility we have out in Creston, or what this volume is going to do, or the potential contamination of it, or how this is going to either be cooked and composted the same way it is now, or is it going to have greater amount of time to be composted because it has added food components to it and added contamination components to it? Is there going to be higher temperatures? We're not 100% sure. So we decided to shelve column F and wait till we get a year of underneath our belt as far as composting and the amount of potential additional work for compost. We just didn't know. So we left F alone, and we're going to hold that till next year or maybe even the following year. G is the capital cost, which Jeff mentioned, and G basically is identified as a new software that Randy just kind of covered to do the routing and to do the tracking of not only just customer information and contamination information, but also service levels, and then making sure that that data dump from the tablet that's going to be in the truck will allow us to go ahead and have it uploaded to our SoftPack system in the office to report to not only TCSD, but also the IWMA, and they'll roll it up and report it to Cal Recycle. So what's in the capital costs? 7 of those tablets, I believe, at about $1,000 a piece, or $800 a piece. Additional software, here you go, software, that we have included in the cost, and then also the camera cost of 7 cameras at $333. So we thought it'd be best to go ahead and just itemize each one of these components of our cost request, our cost increase request, and get a sense for it. So what we did is we basically said, okay, that the capital is going to be, $6,574 plus
Amortized.
amortized, yeah, so that's annualized. We basically took it into each component of what we provide service-wise. As you can see in column N has the total customer count for 32-gallon carts on the residential side, 65-gallon carts and so on. Then we just basically said, okay, if that's 30, I just do one column, which will be the row 7, if you will. So 3 frequencies, 3 container service, 1,231 carts at that size, 32-gallon carts. So times 3 is 3,693 service touches or points. The annual expenditures are allocated out based on the service type, and then we come up with the monthly impact to customers impacted by that service type, which was 21 cents for all of our carts. And as you can see, it kind of gets ran through every one that we do: commercial bins, 2-yard bins, 3-yard bins, and so on and so forth. And step in here, Justin.
Yeah, so I mean,
This is your
just to explain
schedule.
the math too, frequency 3, we have 3 carts for all the residential customers. So they get basically 3 times the baseline of 7 cents because we go once a week, 3 times, 3 carts. And then you go to the commercial side, there's only 1 frequency because we're going once a week, 1 cart, right? And then we spread that allocation out. You could see on the very right, the monthly impact to customers based off the number of services and the number of cans. We took that $6,574 annual expenditure amortized, and then spread it out based off those number of services. So you can see the most heavily weighted is 32-gallon cart customers because that's where the most customers are with the most carts.
So I hope that that logic makes sense to the committee members in terms of spreading out these costs. The next tab over should include the costs for the operating.
Yes.
That's correct.
So again, we took the total units again, and as we kind of did our research and did our studies, we were assuming it was going to take anywhere between, was it 4 or 5 seconds for us to be able to either look at the camera, to work with the tablet, and to also do the investigation for contaminants in each container. And we thought it was fair to say it was between 4 and 5 seconds, broke it down into the units that we did, and then again broke it into services per month, and then broke that into a total additional cost that we'd have to spread into the individual stops. And again, residentially is having the largest burden of it because there's 3 points of service contact with the 3 different carts. And again, for the most part, the trash industry and the waste industry in California hasn't really paid much attention to the black card. With 1383, they now have what they consider container contaminants for a black card. So we need to look at that to make sure that the components that are supposed to be either in the blue container or the green container are finding their way there. And again, this was more just driver time. So we have an hourly rate, which is an improved rate in our rate schedule that's been in there since the franchise started. And we just took that and said, okay, basically that's the number of seconds we're going to take per container to look at it. So if you go to a residential stop and you service that stop 1 time, you're going to go 3 times at 5 seconds, 4 to 5 seconds for those 3 carts to be looked at and to be investigated and to be reviewed. If I go to a restaurant or I go to an office complex and I have a 2-yard container, we're applying the same 5 seconds to it, but that 2-yard container, of course, is serviced maybe only once a week. If that container serviced 3 times a week, then it's getting 5 seconds hit to it for all times we service it, all 3 times we service it that week. So we thought that was the fairest approach. It might take a little bit longer to look at a 2-yard container, but for the most part, we're not assuming, unless it's a restaurant or a certain type of business, a huge elevation. Like this office isn't going to probably generate a lot of trash. They probably bring their lunches or they go out to lunch. They don't have a lot of trash, but a restaurant or a restaurant establishment or a winery with a tasting room that has maybe food served might have a greater potential, so that there'll be more time spent and more review there, but that again is another education process where we go ahead and start to look at a McPhee's or maybe look at, you know, a restaurant here on Main Street that has to have much more elevation, and that elevated education is going to be from us, IWMA, and of course, you know, the training of the employees. That's a big learning curve. I mean, you know, I find myself in my kitchen finally going, you know, I'm putting it in the wrong container, you know, be it a tomato or be it a banana peel, and it's just changing your paradigms of how you review what you do there. We thought this was the fairest approach to come up with the collection routes and the additional costs for our drivers. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, so the next tab over shows how that cost is actually allocated on each of the services that are provided.
To the right.
One more.
I don't think on the next tab over shows how it's allocated. If you go to the right.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
Slide, yeah.
Oh, sorry, my,
Oh, on the same one.
Correct. Yeah.
and I just go to your right.
Slide it over.
Yeah.
there you go. Sorry about that. So yeah, we reviewed these costs and the you know, to staff this concept you know, makes sense, but we want to bring this before the committee, make sure that you understand it and can support the allocation of this time in this manner. And you know, does the additional work that Mid-State's doing to comply, does that seem reasonable in the way it's being allocated to each of the services that are available? And then we'll end. Okay, go on the next tab. Then I can't see what it says. So what is this one again?
This is the admin additional cost.
Oh yeah.
Where we're
So, yeah,
covering the reporting and the increased call volume.
Yeah. So why don't you walk through, Ron, those your estimates of time and how these costs were allocated as well, because this is that other component in addition to the driver time, the monthly reporting.
Right. So much of the desired result from 1383 and CalRecycle's goal is not only diverting organics from the landfill where the methane's created and getting into either a digest or a compost operation such as we have. A lot of it is reporting. So we're not quite sure how it's all going to happen yet, but we're assuming, and we've been tracking now about an additional 12 calls per day. And now when we talk about calls, the new defined call for a 1383 call could be someone calling and saying, you know, what am I supposed to do with a whole basket of strawberries that's gone bad? Is that too much, or can that go in a green waste container? We're supposed to track the individual who's calling, if it's a customer or a non-customer. If they refuse to identify who they are, we just have to mark that as such. They want to know if it's the nature of the call. Was it a complaint? Was it educational based? Was it rate based? Was it service based? And then we're supposed to track that and report that by the 15th of the next month from the preceding month for all the calls that come in for really pretty much any reason that they would call, customer or non-customer. Also, in addition to that, Schedule E is an addendum or an attachment to our addendum, which has a large number of additional administrative reporting, which we've allocated 16 hours a month to, about 4 hours a week. And again, by the 15th of the following month, we have to report total number of service points by customer type. So if the truck goes down the road and it picks up 45 residential single units, we have to count that, and we have to count the volume. If it's a 95 gallon cart or a 64 or whatever, 32, we have to count that and figure out what that is month in and month out. We also have to identify if it's a multifamily, if it was a multifamily versus a single stream or a single unit, we have to count that individually. So we think once we count, it's probably gonna be pretty consistent unless someone doesn't set something else, or unless someone's not home and it's not out at the curb for some reason. But there's an elevation of reports that they want to have based on volume, yardage, tons, what's processed, how it's processed, when it was processed, who was it sold to, what was it sold for, did it stay in the States, did it go outside the States? You know, what's the total percentage that you're bringing in based on the units that you collect? Like I said, either gallons, yards, or tons. what type of customer is it? And then what again did you do with that and how was that processed or recycled? Also has a large number of reports that just talks a little bit about, you know, forward outreach and communication and education, what we're doing within the community to work with Templeton, to work with the IWMA, and to work with all the other collectors and the other cities within the county to have a joint, consistent, cohesive front on the educational process. I'm sure I'm missing some of the 13 parts of it, but it's very extensive as far as reporting goes. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, and then some are annual. They ask about equipment, downtime, you know, how did you process it? The good thing about all the material we collect on the recycling and the organic side goes to our facility on La Cruz Way, and Randy's processing folks really handle all that. So we have that data already, so we can get our hands on it. You know, do we have all the other components that are coming up? Not necessarily, but we're working on it, and we're working on trying to identify, you know, how that investigation takes place. Like one of them says, you know, when it was investigated, for example, we don't have much here in Templeton, but we do have an occasional, you know, abandoned dumping or just, you know, illegal dumping where someone just dumped a load. They want us to track out not only what it was, where it was, and what was the material in the process and what we collected in it, but they want that reported by the 15th of the following month. So it's very elevated as far as the amount of additional reporting that we have to do by the 15th of the following month, and then on an annual basis as well.
So that's the mid-state's estimate and estimates costs per month. And then if you scroll to the right of the screen, you can see the allocation of those costs based on each of the service categories, you know, based on customers. So again, that's the other component of the 1383 costs. And then there's a few other tabs that we should walk through. Maybe Justin, Ron, can you explain what's on this one a little bit?
Oh, sure. So this
I wanna make
is,
sure I'm not missing anything.
so as they went through the process of, we had actually been doing organics for a long time in Templeton, but there was never an approved organics cart rate for commercial establishments. And Brad went ahead and just gave them the same rate that they gave the additional green waste carts for residential, which I think was about $9 or $8 a month. But of course, organics and food waste are a lot heavier. And we always had an organics 1.5 yard and always had an organics 2 yard bin rate approved in our rate sheet. So with the amount of mandatory now organic recycling, so if a commercial establishment has 2 yards or less a week, they have to meet a certain threshold and prove they meet a certain threshold of having lower than 10 gallons of organic waste in that 2 yard. If they have more than 2 yard a week service, they have a threshold they have to meet there also. If they don't, it's mandatory, they have to get a green card. So before, we always had either 1.5 or 2 yard for organics for commercial establishments that had high food volumes, and we've been doing that for probably 3 years or more, right, Randy? 4 years. This is a little bit more complex because if that threshold can't be met and be proven by a waiver request by the commercial establishment through the IWMA, it's mandatory that they have to get a card service. So why is that card service going to be $51? Is it $51? Yeah, $51 a month for once a week service. Well, right now, if I go to a commercial establishment, my front load truck goes there, which is a truck that dumps over top of the cab and picks up the 2 yard or 3 yard or 4 yard bin. That truck goes there and picks that up. Now I have to send another truck to go get the cart that's never been to that commercial establishment before because they didn't have a cart service. And that cart service has got to be picked up by an automated truck that has the camera and has the automated arm on the side of it that gets picked up. So it's a whole different route that's got to be put out there. We don't believe there's going to be, well, I shouldn't say that. We're not concerned about the number of waivers. I think the waivers are going to, number one, are going to take a little while. Then once they're approved by the IWMA through the Cal Recycle approval process, we have to track it to make sure that there's not been a change in the type of waste that they've been creating or generating. And then we have to make sure we track that on I think it's an annual basis or every 2 years to verify that what they said that was met the requirements for waiver is still in place. So this is a whole new component for cart service And we've been doing it at a couple facilities. I believe the jail is one, or the hospital is another one, the jail down the road is another one. And our 95-gallon carts are just extremely heavy with a lot of food, almost where it can't be picked up by the truck because they're about 1,500 pounds a yard for all food waste. So we talked with Jeff and went through the process of narrowing it down to just a 65-gallon cart only for all commercial establishments that have enough food where they're not going to be able to qualify for a waiver. And then we would go ahead and put that out there for the $54, which is the exact same price for a 65-gallon trash card for a commercial establishment. We thought it was fair because the collection rates are about the same, the collection costs are about the same, and organic processing is similar to or just a little bit less than black cart processing. So that's kind of a new tab. Like I say, Brad, 3 or 4 years ago, with Randy's help, went ahead and said, listen, we'll just go ahead and put out carts if we have to. I don't think we have many out there, maybe a dozen or so. But I think because of the new regulations and us now having to go with a different process, it's the right time to get this diced down a little bit smaller than a 1.5 organic container or a 2-yard container, allowing folks to have either a 65 or 265 service 1 or 2 times a week.
Hey, Ron, can you just explain, so the services that are proposed here are 1, 2, or 3 times a week. I see the cart service at $51.44, but can you explain the additional cost that's there? Because I'm surprised that if it's 3 times a week that's not much more. I mean, those costs are not significantly more for 3 times than 1 time.
Yeah, Jeff actually is going through this. This is the one calculation that we had to revise during our last meeting,
Yeah,
because we were using that trash, we were using the baseline of the black can.
right.
We went in and we updated it to show the difference in cost of the organics versus trash, which is where we get that $8.93.
Right.
But as I'm looking at this, Jeff, I think
So
I'm seeing what you're seeing is that this is accounting. What's that?
So the, where it says commercial service 65-gallon cart, does that need to increase?
That does need to increase, but we don't have a baseline for a multiple.
Yeah, but that doesn't, just looking at what they have, that doesn't equal these. These are the 3 times and 2 times and 1 time, right? For the
No,
65
that was
gallon.
we had to come up with a new calculation and send it out.
Oh, and that was what you did there?
And that we did the additional cost for that shows correct. The calculation is for the additional cost of the actual organics versus trash.
Right.
But what it doesn't show is the additional cost for the
Multiple
Truck.
services.
for the multiple
Well, yeah, because
services.
you got
51.44.
weekly service, 51.44 down the board, it should be 51.44 for 1 time a week service. It should be probably 102 and change for.
Yeah, when you look at how it
Whatever-
compares to each.
whatever.
Well, that's why I thought
Do we have-
this fit. went
Do we
from
have customers that are
51
picking up 2
38.
times, 2 times or 3 times a week?
Yeah, it's a new,
So it's a
sir,
new,
it would be a full, a
For
new.
for 65-gallon carts, I do not believe so.
We don't have it.
I do have some that have a 1.5 yard bin that we're doing multiple services on. But
Oh, okay.
You're talking like J&R Meats and
Oh,
you know,
okay.
things
So-
like that.
It's actually, this should have been updated, but it's a good item to discuss because Jeff, what we talked about was getting the difference of the actual substance within the can.
Right.
What I missed was the multiple pickups on there, but we don't really have a baseline for that. Like I can show through calculations what the difference of the cost is for the wet, heavier.
No, I see that. I mean, I'm seeing that on your additional cost column, but I think we can look at how the breakdown is for the multiple pickups of like the 2 and 3 yard bins. They're not doubled, go from 1 to 2. I don't believe. I mean, we have that information right here, but I think there's a little error here. And then to the committee members' questions, right? So right now we don't even. I mean, in Templeton, this is really the gap in service that we think SB 1383 may require. There's been customers that were too small who who are too small to have been previously required to have separate organic recycling. However, under 1383, they may be too large to get an exemption going forward and not generate enough waste to use a bin service. So this is kind of filling that middle ground. And Midstate proposed to offer 1, 2, or 3 day a week service. To answer your question, I don't know who's going to sign up for these services. I think Midstate thought they wanted to offer multiple time a week services because the food waste could become a bit of a nuisance. Even if it's not a volume issue, they may want it dumped more than once a week just because it could be odorous or kind of a nuisance. So that's how that came about. But I think there's something wrong with this. The cost for 2 and 3 times a week should be higher under the base service.
But I mean, I kind of like this setup to where maybe someone only wants the organics removed 3 times a week and then the 65 just once a week. I mean, do we have an option for that?
You mean for their regular trash service?
Yeah.
Yes, so this is a completely
That's
separate
good.
service level. So if they've got say a 1.5 yard bin for their commercial waste that they're doing there, and then they've got this 65 gallon cart, and if they want to do that 65 gallon cart 3 times, they can. And then if they only need their trash dumped once a week, no problem.
Right.
They have the ability to completely set their service level.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is in addition to what they are told,
Yes.
okay, I thought. that
Yeah, this
was
is
the
an additional
cost.
part.
Oh, I
Yes,
thought the
this is-
additional part was
And
just the
then a
additional.
good way to look
Oh,
at
wow,
it is
that's
the weekly service
expensive.
one, because actually, I wanted to talk this through right now, noticing this mistake. The weekly service 2 is most likely gonna be about just a hair less than double of 6930, based off how exponentially it goes up per each service. And Jeff, I think that's where the error in the calculation was, where I removed that calculation that we used for the trash service, just to use it apples to apples. And I should keep that increase in, which is about 90% per service. So are you following me, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm following you. I just want to make sure we're not double counting it because you've already picked up the additional weight on that additional cost column. So
We got the weight in there, but then, so if we were to increase the, because that's what we talked about last time was breaking it out for the weight. But then for the additional service, if you were to go to, could you go to the first worksheet, 2021 worksheet CPI plus tip? And then could you scroll down to like 1.5 yard bin, actually, that's perfect. So if you look at the 1.5 yard and 2 yard bin services there, rows 22 to 31, you can see as the service increases weekly, for each unit of service that we increase, it almost doubles the cost.
right, a little less than double though, because there
Little
are
less.
some costs that are fixed. I'm sure that, it wasn't part of the original rate review, but I'm sure there's like some of the billing costs are the same. Payment processing, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's usually reduced because it's not another container cost, because there's one container being serviced multiple times.
Yeah, so Jeff, would it be fair to use the same
Yeah, I mean,
exponential increase with the additional tonnage costs that it's gonna be to process the organic? So if we go back to fee increase, GW cart fee tab. Now, what I would propose, Jeff, to send out is for the 6037 rate on 09, we would use that same incremental increase that we would see, on average for
Multiple
trash
serv-
services, for multiple
Multiple
services.
services.
It's about 90,
Yes, right.
80 to 90, okay.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I
had-
know.
think we had.
I think that's right. I
85.
think there's just an error here under the monthly charge.
I think so.
So I'll send that out, breaking that out, the percentage increase on the original service and plus the additional cost, and we can get that out to everyone.
Okay, so we can go on to the next tab. We'll have to make a correction there in that one area. And then help me, I can't quite read these
Yeah.
figures or,
So this one, we came up with, instead of building this cost into the rate and penalizing all the customers, we thought there's a lot of service time added for ticketing or citing, tagging, I guess is the right way to say it. About 5 minutes for the driver and 5 minutes for the admin, because they actually have to get a ticket, fill out information on it, stop the truck, get out of the truck, walk over and tag it, and possibly
Take a picture of it.
take picture of
Track it, and then
track
track
it.
it in the tablet and also report it.
And then that tag has to be walked up to the office, dropped off to the admin, who then has to fill out a worksheet that then would go to the
IWMA.
IWMA for them to report it to council.
Okay, right. This is that new fee that we're proposing, the violation reporting.
So, yeah, so basically they'd be charged $10.60 if they were tagged.
But this is not gonna take into effect for a couple of years?
Well,
Until we start tagging, yeah. Well, not a couple
We're gonna
years.
hope that we're gonna have some kind of an educational process that allows for them to, get noticed, and then, as the violators continue to be chronicle, we start to tag and get a mechanism for incentivizing them to do it the right way.
I hope that we'll
Yeah, we-
be using warnings.
Yeah,
and
we
things
don't,
like
we don't wanna come out of the
education,
gates.
yeah.
with it.
Oh, right, yeah.
You're gonna have your guy that's gonna do it every week just because he's getting away with it.
Yeah,
And the IWMA, HF&H, who was the consultant for IWMA, and Cal Recycle's intent is for it to be immediate, but they are giving us a year's worth of learning curve and self-enforcement, if you will. And then I think as the second year starts up and they start to give more policing and more education, I think they're gonna try to be a little bit more heavy-handed, but that's not our intent. I don't think you went over anybody by beating them up with additional charges and trying to educate them.
Yeah, what this really does though is we have to acknowledge this work is going to take place. And so if you don't bill the customer that's causing the work to be done, you end up having to bill all the customers for the work and lumping these costs into that administrative category. So there's kind of two choices about how it goes. Does everybody pay for this work, or do just the people who cause the additional effort pay the fee? So I think that's the methodology that Mid-State's chosen, and I think the staff supports it. This is what we do on our water bills, for example. When folks are late, we send them a late payment, and when they're really late, we put a door hanger on their door, and we charge them for that cost of processing that and putting the door hanger on their door, so that it doesn't become a burden to all the customers.
So if I have a grandkid over and they put a banana peel in my black waste, and that's all that's in there, am I gonna be in violation?
They don't describe the quantity. It just says the container contaminants are identified as being the wrong items in the wrong container.
So the answer would be yes.
If it's caught, sure.
By
If
the
you put it in a
letter of
bag,
the regulation.
if you put it in a bag and it's something we can't see in a visual inspection or in a camera view of it, then there's no way of us catching it. I mean, but yes, technically, the way 1383 is written, there's no identified quantity of any of the contaminants that is an acceptable level to be in the wrong container.
But it's gonna be at your discretion then.
Well, yes, because if we don't catch it, there's,
I like the idea that you're trying to get the people that are doing the contamination, but to my way of thinking, everybody's gonna have a contaminated container.
initially, we're thinking that's a learning curve that's gonna certainly allow for that to be the case. But our addendum has liquidated damages and has language in this for us that we're not allowed to collect the wrong material in the wrong container. So that's our incentive to comply with 1383 and get Cal Recycle to get this diverted out of the landfills and put into compost and digesters. So, yeah, sure, like anything else, I guess if you're speeding, you're not gonna self-report yourself. But we have to identify a way to do it. And if we don't do it correctly, there's a language in the addendum we just signed that allows for liquidated damages and corrections from Cal Recycle and the IWMA for us not doing it correctly. So we're incentivized to do it the right way and catch the banana peel.
And correct me if I'm wrong, right? So for the first year or the first couple of years, it's pretty much self-police, but after that, and once Cal Recycle starts getting involved, they could very well be coming out and doing dumpster dives and going through and doing some of these things and looking for it and making sure that we are keeping up our end of the bargain. So they'll be pressuring us to do so as well.
Yeah, we're gonna gradually work into where we think enforcement and policing may be at a greater level. I don't think we're gonna drive the speed of that because I don't know if there's any benefit to that. I think the good news about where we bring our material to the La Cruz facility is we go through everything. You know, unless it goes to Chicago Grade Landfill, gets dumped in the landfill, we of course don't go through that, but Randy and his field operators in the yard pretty much go through everything. And if we can pull out plastic, we can pull out organics, we can pull out glass or bottles or metal or aluminum, even out of a trash load versus out of a blue load that's going over the recycling line that is being done for that specific reason, for that separation, we do it. So that's a good thing, because we can look at it and kind of self-police ourselves. But I do believe, as Randy said, there is gonna be a part of it where they say, listen, we're gonna we're gonna show up unannounced, look at the load, watch it dump it, do a waste characterization, which we have to do X amount of times per routes per year. And they'll join in on that and say, let's go ahead and go through this and find out what's in it. So there'll be, but that I don't believe is gonna happen for probably another year and a half, as they get their legs underneath them and get their sense for how it's gonna work. And I do believe we're, as a county, a little further ahead than other parts of the state. And I think there's a population component of it, which is gonna be more complex in an LA county versus a SLO county, just by the pure numbers and the pure size. Someone said the other day at a meeting, so well, kind of, as you said, Director Peterson, what if my can's out of the street and I've done everything on them correctly and some kids go by and throw their McDonald's in their own container? Their McDonald's wrappers or their McDonald's food or whatever in my black container in the middle of the night. Well, I did it correctly when I put it out at the curb. And there are concerns of that, but I hope they're far and few between. And as like I say, most of our volumes go back to our facility. So we have the ability to separate it. It's not doing what 1383 is intended to do. And that's intended to hopefully get the generators to create it the right way and then to put it in the right container.
I can just see though, there's gonna be a real big pushback on this.
Oh, sure.
You know, people are not used to having to sort their garbage in the kitchen before they throw it out. I mean, it's bad enough now, I think, and it's just gonna, you know, I don't, anyway. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. You've got no choice. We've got no choice, but I think public is not gonna be very happy.
Well, as Jeff mentioned earlier, the ordinance was agreed to and signed by your board in the fourth quarter of last year, and every municipality has to have an ordinance that gives them a little bit of additional power and additional strength to police it correctly, because it is now a violation of an ordinance that is in place everywhere.
I think we just ought to send all the extra cost up to the state and say, pay this.
We don't disagree with you there.
This is asinine.
Well, on the backside of this whole thing, which I'm sure you'll get into, I mean, not necessarily with us, but I know Jeff was talking about it at your last meeting, because I sat through most of it. Is there's a procurement process that has to be met. So 0.08 tons per population in each municipality has to have some procurement done at either recycled paper or compost, wood chips, or organically produced fuel through the digester or through RNG. And they're going to track that. And I know I sat through the Atascadero City Council meeting the other day, and they're talking about, 15 to 20 hours a week just trying to manage the procurement of all the different departments within their city, saying we got to make sure we do this correctly, because if we don't hit the threshold, which I think for them is like the equivalent of 7,800 tons of compost or some other kind of recycled material, they're going to be fined for not having had the right procurement. I mean, Jeff made a joke at your meeting saying, we're not going to be out of toilet paper. We're not going to worry about doing this or doing that. We're going to do the right thing, but we're going to have to be conscientious about at least counting it.
Hey, Jeff, speaking of that, while I'm thinking about it, I do a lot of donations over there to the community garden. We should look at making sure that you guys get credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so I'd recommend going to the front tab, the worksheet tab, and I've logged off the Zoom on my computer and zoomed in on this iPad so that I can actually have the Excel file open, because I do want to make sure the committee members really understand how this worksheet works. It's a little bit complicated and busy, but I want to explain this to you so that you can follow along. Essentially, all of the services provided are shown in column A. Lines 13 through 15 are your residential services, and then the first series of columns D through H are the rates that are in effect April 1st. So these are the existing rates from last year, last April, the CPI based on 2021 that was approved by the board as a part of your prior ordinance, but administratively approved once the calculations are reviewed. And then the current IWMA rates are shown in this yellow column G. And the build rate, or the amount the customer sees on their bill starting April 1st is in column H. So I wanted you to see that. The next set of columns, J through M, do two things. The first is the Chicago grade landfill had a tipping fee increase in 2021 and again in 2022. And in 2021, the rates, Midstate can request a rate adjustment for the tipping fee increase. And the agreement states that the rate shall be adjusted for that if Midstate requests it. Well, in 2021, I believe it was $1. That request was paused. We didn't go through the Prop 218 process. And by the way, the tipping fee increases cannot be pre-approved. They have to go through a new Prop 218 process. So we didn't do a rate adjustment in 2021. And so what you see here is the collective rate adjustment, tipping fee adjustment in 2021 and 2022 shown in this kind of a sage color column. So that's the allocation of the tipping fee costs amongst all the services. And this is using essentially the same methodology that we've used for several years when there's been tipping fee increases. So the tipping fee alone increase, you can see how much additional it costs for each service type up and down the for all the services, residential and commercial. Item K or column K takes the essentially the old or what was column F and adds in this tipping fee increase to come up with a new base rate. Then importantly, IWMA is having a rate increase, a fee increase effective July 1st. And it's a little bit complicated. Presently, for many years now, the fee is 2% on all services, on all gross, not gross revenue, but per service, unless it's under $50, a residential council under $50, in which case it was a flat 30 cents a month. IWMA has eliminated the 30 cent provision or the $50 provision and is now going to have a 5.4% fee for all services. And this additional fee, or the additional 3.4%, if you will, deals with their 1383 costs. Now, it's a little more complicated than that because they started incurring a lot of costs before they had revenue. So it covers some of the costs they've already incurred. But we have a fee report that justifies this, and this fee is now in place. So we don't have a choice about collecting that fee, or I'm sorry, remitting that fee, and should include this fee in our next notice, so customers know where their money goes. And it's going to, you can see the biggest increase is going to be on the 32 and 65 gallon cart customers by a percentage wise. They're going from 30 cents to like $1.80. So it's really like a 600% increase for those customers. So it's really pretty substantial. For everybody else, it's a little more than double. So that column M is what the cost would be starting in July. If there were not any additional mid-state costs. And then columns O through F add the mid-state costs. Really, it's in O. The mid-state costs that are shown there under 1383 are all those cost factors that we went over in more detail earlier. The administrative costs, the amortization of the equipment costs, the driver additional time per stop costs. So those are totaled and tallied and shown under column O, and the bottom line impact then is shown for July 1, is shown under column R. So if you wanted to compare the cumulative costs that we're talking about today, you'd compare column R with column H.
H, right, yeah.
So you can see under column R, the impacts, and they're not, it's gonna be difficult to describe this because it's not it's not the same percentage across the board to all these categories. As a matter of fact, some of the lower cost services pick up a higher percentage for, in large part because of IWA, but the costs are not equally higher by a fixed percentage because of the way the cost allocation is proposed to occur. So I want to make sure that we can answer any questions about how this sheet works before we go on to some of the new services that we'll be talking about. So
If I could make a comment, and Jeff, you said a couple of times, the lower end services are getting, quite a bit of additional fee. And that is my concern because, typically, especially for someone, a household of one or two, that's a substantial increase. So I was hoping that there is a way that we could look at these rates and at least relieve some of that from, not increase as much. I have the rates for San Luis Obispo in front of me, and they went through the same thing, and they are going to increase their rates as well. But for their 32 gallon, they're going to be $22.51 versus us is going to be $37.60. And then their 64 gallon is going to be 45. So we're still going to be higher, but not as much. And then their 96 gallon is going to be $67.56. So we're still a little bit higher, but
I'd have to take a look at that because that 22 doesn't sound right, because I thought we were still below them on those rates.
I have,
They had like a,
and then they described in there,
they had like a, what do they call that?
the 8.
They get like a special rate for like needy household or something like that, I thought.
So, but yeah, so and what they have a mini card or
Oh,
something.
the 30, oh yeah, shoot.
Yeah, so they have a 20 gallon. So,
Yeah, they
so
do.
I mean, I don't know what the difference is, but obviously they're substantially less. And on the back of it explains all the different additions that why they're charging additional. So I'm just concerned that 37.60. I mean, I think our rates were higher, and now adding all this stuff to it is just even making it more difficult for residents. So I mean, I know we went through the calculations, and if there was a way to at least, because technically with this 1383, we're not supposed to put as much stuff in the black garbage can. So most of it's gonna go in the green garbage can. So maybe people need a smaller size. Yeah, a black container. So I know over here, they do offer a 20 gallon one. So I don't know if there's a possibility to relieve some of that pressure off of customers to offer either a smaller size gallon or lower the rates on the lower end, because they're getting a big jump. And I know you guys, like when you were calculating your charges, you went basically by how much time it takes, for each stop. Well, it seems like the time for someone that has 95 gallon was the same, right? As somebody that had the 32, but they're putting 3 times more amount of, filling them in terms of landfill and things like that. So I don't know if necessarily those things should be the same, be equal.
Yeah, I mean, and then I know they're in the process of doing a 218 there with like a 26% increase. And I think you're right as far as how they're doing that. Because I think of where they are in the university and downtown and a lot of apartments, they do offer 20. We never had it as part of our pricing. I guess we could certainly look at that. What's unique about San Luis Obispo is they're very well known for having competitive residential rates, but the bulk of the burden of the trash costs is in the commercial. And if you look at the commercial prices.
Well,
the
the van
commercial-
obviously have more commercial, yeah, I don't have
Exactly.
the commercial, I don't have that, but
Yeah,
I
like,
just have the residential.
like our 1.5 yarder, which after our increases, our 1.5 commercial yard bin's gonna be serviced for $111. I'm sorry, $121. Their 1.5 commercial bin is $382.
Yeah, so yeah, and
It's a
obviously
lot.
they have more commercial.
But they've always been very famous for having the commercial rates kind of subsidize the residential ones, but we could certainly look at a 20 yarder. Problem is, 20 yarder is very hard to do automated. Most of their routes that do 20 yard or 20 gallon carts are rear loaders, and they run rear loaders where the guys are on the back of the truck.
Take
And
it.
it's hand serviced versus our automation. We don't run any rear loaders, and all of us is fully automated, so it could be challenging. Randy could probably expand on that.
Yeah,
more
so
than
what
me.
what happens is you wind up having to set your clamps on the side loaders to the smallest container. So once you set that clamp for that smallest container, and you start picking up your 65s and your 95s, you start destroying those containers because you're squeezing too hard, because you gotta get that pressure down on that smaller container. If I had my way, I'd get away with the 35s, but I know that that's.
Yeah. So, I mean, then maybe if we could look at the way we're calculating the rates, then if it's not feasible to get smaller, we could.
Go based off gallons versus.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like I'm looking at our 95 gallon being $58, and then the 32 is $37. I mean, that is not that much of a difference, so maybe the 95 gallon one should be a little bit higher, or, when we calculate it, so I don't know. I just trying to look at the lower end, the
Well,
smaller container.
two issues have occurred here. One, the the biggest component of that, the biggest component of the increase is the IWMA eliminating the fixed fee under $50. So they go from paying 30 cents to $1.93, while the 95 gallon container goes from paying, so that's about more than 6 times. And the 95 gallon container person goes from paying $1.06 to $3.01, so a little less than 3 times. So we don't have control of that. IWMA got rid of the sort of preferential treatment to the lower garbage user, and they're trying to create some revenue and eliminated that provision. So that's a component of it. As
The
far
other thing
as
I want to point out too is that San Luis actually does not have the IWMA rate in that rate that they're putting out.
I thought they did.
No. They're doing it as a pass-through. They didn't put it on their notice.
I see, they have it for SB 1383, but they don't have it for
Yeah, they don't have the IWMA fee on it.
So the other thing is the components of this $2.20, that's really what Midstate's proposal is all about, right? This column O. That's what we're really talking about now, is what's in column O. And that breakdown, because that's what's new. The tipping fee stuff in column J already accounts for increased tonnage as container size goes up. The column O, those costs are pretty much fixed in this proposal based on the time spent, and there was not a differential for a smaller can versus a larger can. So I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about this. The time it takes to key in the information is likely not going to change based on container size. Maybe the opportunity for contamination, or the amount of time it takes to actually observe the items going into the truck, or is that different on a larger container?
No, I would say not. Usually what winds up happening if going by experiences is that once they start downsizing their trash container, that means that they're using the recycling container as more of an extra trash bin. So they may downsize because of cost, but that doesn't necessarily mean they downsize the amount of material that they put in. So they wind up contaminating one of the other bins.
Right, so if they have a 32 gallon cart, that service comes with a larger green waste container and a larger blue container. So that's good, but if I guess I'll call it wishful recycling. So when something doesn't fit in the black or they think it can go in the blue, that's where it ends up going. So I don't know if there's more potential for contamination or not, Jeff. I think residential, I think people are conscientious about it, but I certainly understand the director's concern about, the rate increases, but proportionally, if the truck is costing $80 an hour to go down, it's picking up 32 gallons, the equivalent of doing something that maybe 3 times that size, from a 32 gallon to a 96, it's still the same operating cost for the truck. You have more components in the container because you got 3 times the gallons from 32 to 96. But the cost of the driver and the cost of the equivalent truck time to service that same container, although it's smaller, it's still the same amount of time. So proportionally, it's a little bit more expensive for that smaller can to get the same service as you have a larger volume on a per unit basis, on a per gallon basis. So I don't know if we could go a smaller one and have it make more sense or not, but I mean, we can certainly look at it. And the scenario with Slow is that it's a different downtown area, and they just have different services with their rear loaders. And I think a lot of apartments, a lot of condos, and a lot of students in some of those high rises that I just think have smaller services and has less
When
volume.
you say that volume offset, right?
I think so. I think from what I've studied on it when I looked at it, but I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah.
Do you guys keep track now of the number of containers that are dumped? Or not?
Yes, well, we know how many are out there and how, do we keep track of it in the sense of like what we're doing here? No.
Because
So if-
I'm thinking, I just know from my neighborhood, but most people that I know don't put out their green waste every week.
No, correct.
Maybe once a month. I got a lot of trees and a lot of weeds and a lot of stuff, so I'm pretty much sometimes going around and knocking on doors, say, you're not gonna use your green container, let me use it, but.
sure.
So I'm almost thinking, I'm gonna have to get another green container. But anyway, I'm just thinking now, that everybody's gonna have to use their green container every week, so.
And we have to record it if they don't put it
Right.
out. That's one of the 5 seconds of, oh, no green container out. Click, okay, next, that's part of that cost.
Yes. And
Yeah, so
that's-
right now, in this column O was based on assumptions of time spent per container with I guess I'd say the assumption is that doesn't differentiate, there's no change depending on container size. But that's, again, this column O is really what all of this is about. Everything else is kind of like the IWMA fees that we're stuck with. So I think we could, if the committee, I think what Midstate has done and what we've reviewed earlier, because you're seeing the sort of second iteration of this, was to make sure that this was a defensible way of allocating these costs by service. Could the costs separate, could we do this differently and say, let's just total all these costs and come up with a percentage and say, let's say it's 3%. I don't know what it is, but let's just say it's 3% of Midstate's costs. It's gonna be a 3% increase, and then do an increase 3% across the board instead, and that still be defensible. Yeah, that's possible, or maybe even likely, because we have all those costs built in here. But I think they went a step further and allocated the cost to the service that it impacted. But I think you do have a choice about, or we have a choice about how we're going to get those costs paid. At the end of the day, Midstate probably doesn't care how the costs come in as long as the revenue comes in to cover those costs. So I think, if the committee has a preference, it wants us to go back and say, oh, what would this be if it's just a percentage for SB 1383 Midstate instead of these fixed amounts? That might not be too terribly difficult to do.
I'm not too sure, Jeff, though, that it's gonna be much different. You take a percentage I kind of like what they've done, and I appreciate what they've done. I think I would be all willing to go with this, but I'd like to look at it in a year, once you've got some more statistics or actual statistics to see how it changes or if it changes. I personally think it's defensive. I mean, I think it's terrible. I think, I think we're trying to pacify the state, for no good reason, in my opinion, but, we have to do it, so. I kind of like what I see here. I don't like the figures, but I mean, I like the methodology. And I don't think we're gonna come up with much better methodology. And to me, percentages is just saying, to me, it's harder, I guess it would be harder to defend the percentage than it would be to defend this.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a more defensible method of cost allocation. But again, just think about, all the costs on these spreadsheets are really looking at just column O's impacts. So even if you were to redesign this, you're only talking about doing something within about that $2.20, and it's not going to go to zero. So,
I mean, I would like to do something for the people who are on fixed incomes and the people that this is gonna hurt the most, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna add. Do you guys do anything for like your water bills or anything like that for fixed income people or specialized rates, anything like that?
no.
PG&E does.
Yeah, we would too if we had their money.
Yeah.
I think just to add to the rates as it's related to San Luis Obispo, I think one thing Brad is pretty adamant about is being the best rate in North County. And I think we still are.
Yeah.
Who we've looked at, but just keeping that in mind. Yeah, San Luis does have a lower rate, but
Yeah, I don't know where they're dumping their stuff. I mean, is it?
Waste Connections is their service provider, and they own the landfill down there.
Oh, they own that.
And they own, and they're also invested in the digester and the compost facility there.
Again, I mean, if you look at their commercial rates, they're not starving. They've just got.
Their commercial rates really subsidize their residential, which we understand. There's a lot of municipalities that have franchises that are kind of geared toward that.
Yeah.
And I think they have always had that. I think Brad will be the first one to tell you, well, that's just something they've always done, and so much commercial down there that it's an easier place, it's an easier piece of pie to get it from because there's just that much commercial down there. But I mean, they did in that same document that you might be looking at, Director, they did break down the different costs. Like they said, 1383 is about 3.84% and so on, and 3.7 for capital, and then increase in insurance premiums, and an operating cost, they got 5.6. I think kind of aligned with where we're at.
Yeah, exactly.
We just have a much more weighted volume to our residential because that's the biggest piece of our pie
I
here.
think our rates were just
It
higher
really
to
is.
begin with.
It really is. I mean, if you go a little over to the left there, you can look at the column count for stops. Maybe go to the worksheet, the second worksheet right there.
yeah.
And you can see if you go, I thought one of them had the total counts on.
Go to the capital increase one, and it'll have there it is.
Oh, there you go, customers. So column N, 1,231 have the smallest cart they can get. And the lowest rate that they can get based on that. And that's the biggest chunk of the amount of activity we're gonna be driven to participate in for 1383. So the percentage is a little greater to those smallest 32 gallon carts. But you can see the majority of the lion's share of how we're trying to get our costs recovered is in that customer base on resident, which is the 1231, the 811, and the 278.
That's what I thought, but I guess it's not possible if we could get a smaller cart, to help people out that are only 1 or 2 person in
With
the.
an automated-
I can look around and see if there's something that's similar to the size. The diameter is gonna be
Yeah.
the biggest thing, because
Yeah.
we do break a lot of carts, and we go through those quite regularly.
Yeah.
But we just either fix them, replace them, do whatever. But if we get to that smaller, it's really gonna be.
It's just something.
All my cars are broke.
Oh, they are cracked?
Because I had them replaced and they gave me a cracked one to replace the cracked one.
To get his address.
I was gonna say, hold on, I'm gonna get out my card right now. You can tell me tomorrow. I'll be on the price for it. Actually, there you go. So you guys both have it.
Okay, thank you. All right.
So
The other thing that I am kind of curious about is IWMA. How much of that increase is due to the fact they've lost their biggest revenue source in San Luis Obispo County?
That's probably a huge portion of it.
yeah, it's a
And
component of.
what's the prognosis of them staying viable versus another? I know I'm getting out of the picture here, but getting the county, I don't know, they're gonna do something or somebody else involved. I mean, I'm just not comfortable at all with IWMA. I mean, it's about as bad as the state as far as I'm concerned, but.
The county is doing something because they're servicing their own constituents. I don't know if there's been any talks of them, reaching out and extending out that Jeff probably knows a little bit.
Jeff, do you know anything?
Yeah, they're not providing those services outside to other entities. The counties is a little unique. They're able to exempt themselves from most of 1383's requirements because of the density of population. And the county used to provide the trash service, not directly, but through a franchise agreement in Los Osos. And as a matter of fact, because Los Osos doesn't qualify for that exemption, they're giving back the franchise agreement to the Los Osos CSD. Los Osos CSD is going to be part of IWMA. So the county's able to do this because they're really not doing all the items. They're not needing to do all the items that the rest of us, or many of us in Templeton anyway, would need to do because we don't qualify for the population density exemptions.
The only waiver that's allowed for a residential customer service base is population of 75 people or less per square mile. So the county applied for a waiver from Cal Recycle in December and said, these portions of the county unincorporated have less than 75 people per square mile. And they were waived on the 28th of December by Cal Recycle for the bulk of the county that's now included outside of the IWMA. So it gets a little bit more tricky as you kind of get into more populated areas, because then the components that we're kind of recovering costs are for have to be done for reporting and for IWMA, because the IWMA is the designee for many of the municipalities, including Templeton, for a lot of the dumpster diving, education, the stickers, the kitchen pals. So there's a little reason behind that, but I think the county will probably, and as Jeff said, there's not really a comparable because they do two different services. But the county's gonna leave it at 2%. They told us they're not gonna probably go up this year at all, maybe look at the beginning part of next year. So there'll be folks looking saying, why are we going to 5.4 for the IWMA and staying at 2? But they aren't apples to apples. They're two different comparables as far as what they gotta do because of the waiver that they got for the low population, which most of the municipalities, including Templeton, don't have the possibility of.
But yeah, well, we'll see what happens with IWMA, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully at least they've been helpful so far with you guys.
Well, yeah, I think there's always
At least
been,
paying for something.
there's a learning curve there. I think they're going through the same ones we are as far as, what are the components of a successful 1383 plan. I get the diversion goal of trying to get these, fast digesting gas emitting fuel out of the landfill, put them into a compost where you got higher temperatures and you got more moisture and you got more controls over it. And it turns itself in 3 months versus, years and years and years of creating methane gas in a landfill. Which, I again, myself, having operated landfills, I don't understand the whole concern about the methane gas. Most landfills in Subtitle Ds that have been constructed since Subtitle D came out from the EPA have to have a methane collection system or they can't exist. So most folks that have putrescible waste that will digest and break down and make methane capture their methane gas. I'm not quite sure, again, how much is being admitted. Most new landfills have methane gas collection, which doesn't allow it to be released. So, but it was a focus that they had in 16, and when they passed the law, the goal was to try to reduce as much as possible. The other big component, which I'm sure Jeff knows more about than I do, is the reuse of the food, whether you have to actually have a program for tier 1 and tier 2, where you're actually reusing the food for homeless or for shelters or for needies.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, Jeff, what do we need to do at this point?
Okay, so let's
Have we
want
gone
to
over everything?
a couple more things. If you're okay with the way column O is allocated, I just want to highlight a couple things on the main spreadsheet, and that's rows 53, 54, 55, that please disregard these current figures. I'd like to work with Justin and I think this is there's an error here. This is the, again, back that we spent some time talking about that before. So those numbers will need to change. Otherwise, there's some services that we're going to try to make some clarifications on the notice. The go back cost or fee, which is I think rarely applied or rarely billed by Midstate, really only should apply when the truck is still en route. We talked about ways of dealing with this issue about somebody perhaps having a contaminated load, rearranging their garbage, and then calling for a pickup. And that go back fee isn't enough to cover an independent truck running from Midstate all the way out to that residence. It's only if that truck's on the route already. So I want to clarify that in the 218 notice so that the Midstate has the ability to say, no, that fee doesn't work. In that case, we have to charge you an hourly rate, or you just wait until next week. We're removing this commercial green waste cart fee because it's really being replaced with the organic fees that are part of rows 53, 54, and 55. And then the new fee is the violation fee that we went over earlier. So everything else is pretty standard. Most of these fees, I mean, I don't get inquiries about them, the one-time fees very often. So anyways, that's that. If the committee is satisfied with the cost allocation, knowing that we're going to make some adjustments to 53, 54, and 55, or that's that green, really the organic food carts for commercial businesses. If the concept works, we can proceed with developing the Prop 218 notice. That's why we held the meeting this week, is in order to have, if we want to have the rates in place before July 1st, the last date for our board to have that hearing is June 21st. The Prop 218 notice must be out like in early May. If we start working on it now, we have a chance of getting it in our utility bill in April and meeting that deadline. So there's some advantages of doing so, sooner than later. Otherwise, we could run the risk of the hearing not taking place until July, and that would have some impacts to Midstate, particularly on the IWMA fee, because that's good. That's being imposed July 1st.
I'm okay
Yeah, I'm okay with
with after the changes you mentioned. Yeah.
the
I'm okay with it.
allocation. I'm not satisfied with the way it ended up, but so be it. Anyway, yeah, I'm happy with,
Okay.
Put a lot of work into it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
appreciate it.
For your time today.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Good
I
luck.
worked out that calculation, so I'll pass that around to everyone for those specific rows that you talked about. So
Okay,
just
perfect,
get out of my way.
Good luck with the implementation.
Well, we're
Yeah,
still
it's the operation part that becomes fun. when we
Yeah.
have to try to play around with it.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you.
All right. So next item is the park improvement plan for Everest Park.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update the committee members on this item. You met last year on it when the plans were like 75% complete. We got them to 95% with some of the very minor changes that you had requested, and asked our consultant, the architects, to proceed with getting planning approval from San Luis Obispo County.
Thanks, Jeff.
That happened in January and February. We applied for a fee waiver. I haven't heard back whether that's been awarded yet, but the county has begun review without a payment of fees. So I anticipate they will grant us a fee waiver. Two things occurred. One, the county wants to process this as a grading permit. So our MIG had to revise the application and submit a grading permit plan. And then last week we learned that I don't have a lot of good information here, but you may remember that we were always concerned about the ADA the cost of getting ADA access from the road down into the park. It's kind of the existing grade is steeper than ADA allows. Now, 2 years ago, when we were working with Brightview, they thought that it might it might permit an exception under the road provision where if the roadway is steeper than ADA allows, the sidewalk can be steeper. But this isn't a road. I didn't think that was gonna fly. When we got MIG involved, they said, well, here's the deal. We're gonna consider ADA access from the ADA parking stalls, and we'll improve the parking stalls to become fully compliant, and all the access to the new facilities will be compliant. And the curb cut at the top would be compliant up on Gibson. Well, after a couple months of review, the county's taking the position that we have to satisfy ADA compliance from the road on Gibson down into the park. So that has delayed their review, and it may require significant changes to that ramp. So I wanted I don't have an answer yet. I think we're gonna have to be working with the county on their interpretation and because it's gonna be quite complicated to achieve ADA slope, qualified slope in that area. Because you remember, we need retaining walls already and things of that nature. So that's where we stand. We have already kind of lost the window of doing this construction in 2022. We were gonna do it in the summer, but the permitting is gonna take too long. So we're looking now, best case scenario would be summer of 2023.
Wow.
So this ADA issue is probably very significant, however. So we'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. Wow, that's not good news.
Nope.
All right. I think,
This information is gonna go out to the board, I assume, or some way.
Yeah, it'll be in these minutes and it'll get to the board.
Okay,
any questions?
nope.
No comments? No. Okay, all right. And that was it. There's no other items to discuss, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your vacation.
Thank you. You have a great evening. Enjoy the rain.
Yeah, it keeps going.
I will take it.